building, as you may have noticed, has the date of 1895 on the front of it. But this is the location where Dr. Pinkerton was. Of course, he was at college also. We're going to go over there next and go into the new library where they have the melodeon. But this is the building or the location where that occurred. And that is Louis Letty Pinkerton in the stained glass there. This is a beautiful old building. A lot of the older churches were built in this sort of circular seating pattern, which is what I like. The church in Downers Grove, where I am now, is a round building. It has a fan-shaped auditorium. So I like that. As you can see, everybody, even when you're seated, you're not just looking at the back of somebody's head. But a lot of the old church buildings were built this way with a kind of a fan-shaped pattern too. All right, who's got questions? Anybody? Anybody has questions? A lot of this we've covered already. Sometimes if I've just got a tour group, I have to explain everything, but mostly you already know everything.
She has a good question.
All right.
Which is the wing that they threw the
That was in the old building.
Well, that was the older building. That building is no longer standing.
And where was the site of that building, Steve? The old one?
I understand that it was on this site, that this building was built on the site of that building.
Did they tear that down or did it burn down?
I don't know the answer to that question. I'm guessing it was torn down since it was a planned construction. They used some of the brick from the old building in the front facade here, is what I've been told. Yeah, it's an architecturally impressive building, and I noticed that the church I grew up in Indianapolis, Irvington Christian Church, Irvington Church of Christ, had been a Methodist church, and they bought the old building when they went out and built a new in the 1930s, and it was a little bit like this. It was more ornate, it had a lot of dark cherry woods and so forth. Had a slope, or the floor actually sloped down, so you had really clear line of sight, and it was at least twice as big as this auditorium. But then I noticed when I moved to Danville that the Methodist church there had almost exactly the same floor plan. And I got to talking to some of the people there, and it was built almost exactly the same year, back in the 1890s. Well, most of the denominations, of course, had these central agencies. I know the Southern Baptist continues even to this day. They have their home missions department has a division that governs church, that has church building plans and designs and so forth, and financing and so forth. So you can choose from 6 or 8 different plans, but that's why many of them wind up looking very similar to each other. And I suspect that's what happened there, is they were using the same floor plan. Buy things in bulk and get a cheaper price, I guess, for that. But anyway, kind of interesting to study the architecture of these old buildings. All right, any other questions? Anybody? Stuart?
You could probably, the acoustics in here is probably really a lot better than in a lot of places, because I believe everybody can hear the same volume.
Yeah. And they built them really for that purpose. I mean, the idea was to have good acoustics and be able to hear and be able to see, and it gives more a sense of community, I guess you'd say, than if some of these churches I see that it's like they're trying to build a tunnel. I mean, they're long and narrow, and the build of the ceiling is way down low, and I don't guess it matters a whole lot, but I like a place where you have a more open kind of seating.
What's the size of the congregation today here? Do you have any idea?
I don't know. The gentleman that was unlocking the door probably could tell us that, but I don't know how big the congregation is. Yes.
So what was the history right after the problem with the melodeon with that church? I mean, we kind of know what it was then, but then what was sort of the recent history right after the melodeon?
After they introduced it, well, I'm sure that there were some people who left. I mean, I don't know specifically where they went, but of course there were churches all over this bluegrass area, and I'm sure it's like today. I mean, we were talking on the way over, a church at Frankfort closes down, then people go to Overland or whatever the case may be, or they don't They come out of Lexington, they'd rather be in a small place, they go to Georgetown, or sometimes people live in Georgetown, they'd rather drive into the, to a larger church. I'm pretty sure that it worked the same way. Human nature doesn't change too much over the years, but I don't know specifically what happened here. I mean, in a fairly small town like Midway, where you have a college that's probably the largest employer in town, and if the college is aligned with the church, as it was in this case, probably any dissenters would have to go somewhere else. And just like with the Baptist churches a couple of generations before that, you get a two-coal pile situation if you have equal numbers, but usually what happens is there's a majority of one kind or the other. Usually the majority stays with the building, retains the ownership right, the minority has to go off and start their own congregation somewhere. So they may have met in a storefront or whatever the case may be. That's how that often works out. But I don't know specifically what happened. Anybody else? Questions? I'm sorry? Yeah. It is interesting, though, as things have changed, the independent Christian churches, the more, I guess you'd say, conservative in some ways of the Christian churches, that have gone in for the big mega churches. That's kind of the southeast and south side in Lexington, who's got 10,000 members or however many. They are not content with a little piano or even a baby grand piano and an organ. I mean, they're going to have the praise band and electronics and the fog machines and the strobe lights and it's like going to a professional entertainment concert. And the musicians are usually semi-professional quality, at least, if not better. And although somebody said that just makes both worship and rock music worse, which is an opinion that I will share, actually. But those people that are in the mega church end of things, to them, a piano and organ that's old school. They're not interested in the piano and the organ much. They want to go the whole, not as big as what I said I would do last night with the symphonic band and so forth. But they'll have this big sound and these big auditoriums. Anybody ever been in Southeast or South Side in Lexington? I've been in both of them. They are huge auditoriums on huge campuses.
Yeah, they branched off into Georgetown.
Have they?
There's a huge group that meets at the elementary school.
Now, Steve, when they just have a piano and organ, they'll call that a traditional
Yes.
service.
Yeah.
And then they'll have a contemporary service with the rock.
Maybe in an elementary school or something, that's way different from if you're on the big campus. I mean, you go over to one in Louisville and they've got, multiple parking lots. The last time I was there, they had some kind of a tram or transport system that runs around and to get you from one campus to the other. And I mean, it's like being on a college campus in some ways.
But there are, I know churches of Christ that'll have a cappella service and then have an instrument.
Mm-hmm.
I read it.
There are
Have
some
an instrument service.
Yes, they're cropping up in a lot of different locations. Absolutely.
And even those churches, the Christian church, Baptist churches, they're even now dividing over whether they want to stay contemporary or keep it the traditional way. We know a couple of friends of ours that are music directors at the Christian church in Georgetown.
Yeah.
They're losing members because they want to stay their conservative way, which is the organ and piano.
The traditional in that sense. Yeah, it's the worship wars, as it's been dubbed, is a huge deal. If you, I use this illustration, I may use it tomorrow, but if you've read Rick Warren's book, Purpose-Driven Life or Purpose-Driven Church or Purpose-Driven Band, he's got a whole series of them. But he talks about how they did their music, and as in a secret church, they hired a firm to do a survey to see what the people want. And the idea is you find out what your audience, your target market wants, and then you give it to them. And he said, we decided to adopt a professional electronic, contemporary service, and he said, yes, it cost us a few hundred members who didn't like it, but we gained several thousand more who did like it, and that's the whole philosophy behind it, is you find out what people want, and you give it to them, and you don't impose tradition on them or anything biblical as far as that's concerned. It's a seeker model, and a seeker-driven model is what they call it. So, anyway, yes, sir.
I noticed in the same building you had there, but what's with the CDC